In the next hour, I'm going to take you to 11 worlds that exist only in whispers, a library prayed beneath endless sand, a city that wakes only when darkness falls, a constellation erased from every sky map, and a gate carved from moonlight itself. These aren't just stories. They're invitations to discover what happens when we learn to listen to silence. The Cartographer who listened to silence. It is said that in a forgotten quarter of an old coastal town, where the streets narrow into threads and the lamps burn low even at midday, there once lived a cartographer who drew maps no one else could read. His workshop, hidden behind a warped wooden door and a curtain of hanging reeds, was a chamber where dust drifted like constellations freed from the sky. And there, in the dim glow of an unseen lantern, he traced lines across parchment with an attention so quiet it felt like prayer. Whispers tell us he did not map the world as others did. He did not draw mountains because he had climbed them, nor chart rivers because sailors demanded their lengths. Instead, he listened. He leaned toward silence as if it were an old companion, and from that silence, shapes began to appear to him. Faint, trembling, like a memory trying to return to the surface of a dream. His quill followed these murmurs with reverent care, moving not across land, but across something softer. The echoes of vanished shorelines, the shadows of pilgrim paths, long disintegrated under centuries of wind. Some believe he was not merely capturing routes, but retrieving them. For beneath his fingertips lay a map whispered to have been drawn from memory itself. Not his own, but the world's. Inside his workshop, time drifted at an unhurried pace. Shelves of parchment leaned forward and as though listening. Jars of mineral pigments slept in muted colors of clay, dusk blue, and faded copper. The lantern cast an amber circle around the cartographer's hands, revealing lines so delicate they seemed ready to lift into the air and float away like strands of spider silk. Each stroke was a breath caught between worlds. Every so often he paused, not to rest, but to listen. Head turned slightly, eyes unfocused. Outside, the night was deep and unmoving. No footsteps passed. No wind stirred the reeds. And yet, something spoke. A soft, almost imperceptible hum. Some called it imagination. Others called it madness. But in old diaries left behind by traveling monks, there were mentions of certain gifted souls who could hear the language of forgotten places, the murmur of lands that had loved and lost too much to remain silent. They were called earth listeners, and if such wanderers once existed, the cartographer may have been the last. As the lantern flickered, the shapes on the parchment grew more elaborate. Curved shorelines swelled into spirals that resembled shells pressed against the ear. Pathways bent in gentle arc like the strokes of ancient calligraphy. At the center of the map, if a center could truly exist in something that felt more like a constellation than a chart, a faint symbol pulsed like a heartbeat, a circle marked by 3 tiny stars. Some scholars, upon later seeing this symbol, whispered of a mythical land spoken of only in dreams, a place where ruins of pale stone hummed with ancient hymns when touched by moonlight. Legends described it as a sanctuary built by early monastic orders, ones that believed the world's first truths were not spoken or carved, but sung softly into the earth. Over centuries, these orders vanished, leaving behind fragments of prayers etched into broken lintels. and stories of travelers who woke from sleep with sand in their pockets, claiming they had walked through a white city that was not there when morning came. It is into the direction of that dreamlike land that the cartographer's map seemed to drift. He worked through nights when the moon was thin and trembling, and through mornings when light filtered through old shutters like pale breath. Outside, life went on without him. The marketplace, the harbour, the tide's daily rhythm. But inside his workshop, only silence ruled. Even when he moved, even when ink whispered across parchment, the silence felt unbroken, as though sound had bowed and stepped aside out of respect. It is said that he rarely ventured out. When he did, it was only to the cliffs overlooking the sea, where the horizon stretched into a silver haze. There, he would sit on a flat stone worn smooth by centuries of wind, holding his parchment to the sky, as if waiting for the sun to confirm the paths he had drawn during the night. Fishermen told tales of seeing him speak to the horizon under his breath. Not words, breaths, soft, measured, as though he were trying to match the pulse of the world. And perhaps, in those moments, he was listening again. Myths mingle with faint historical traces. There are accounts from astronomers who visited the region centuries later, noting unusual patterns in their star charts. Constellations that seemed subtly shifted, as if arranged by an unseen hand pointing toward an unnamed horizon. One scholar recorded that the stars felt restless, as if aligning themselves with destinations lost to time. Was it coincidence? Was it imagination? Or did the stars remember the place the cartographer sought? No one can say for certain. But old stories insist that when a land long forgotten yearns to be found, even the heavens may bow to guide the way. Somewhere in those faint alignments, the cartographer believed he saw confirmation of the map he was making. Not proof, but an echo, a reflection of something calling gently through the emptiness. There are only whispers about what the final days of his work looked like. Some say he grew thinner, as though the map drew sustenance from him, feeding on his memories, his breath, his quiet devotion. Others describe him as radiant, illuminated by the purpose he had discovered. The truth, as always, remains veiled. What we do know is that one night, when the fog rolled in from the sea, in soft spirals, he prepared for a final journey. He wrapped the map carefully, as one might wrap a sacred relic. He placed it inside a simple oiled cloth satchel, then extinguished the lantern with a single calm exhale. Witnesses recalled seeing him walk down the narrow street toward the harbour, his figure fading into the mist, as though he were being gently reclaimed by the dream he had pursued. He did not return. Years later, long after his workshop had fallen quiet and dust had reclaimed the shelves, the map was found. Though not by those who searched for it. A fisherman, seeking driftwood along a forgotten shore, discovered the satchel wedged between two rocks, untouched by waves. Inside lay the parchment, miraculously preserved, its ink still vibrant under the pale morning light. But here is where the story turns to mist. The map did not show land as we know it. Its lines curved and looped like sighs. Its symbols shimmered faintly, as if responding to touch. And though no scholar could agree on what it depicted, all felt a subtle pull from it. A sensation like standing on the edge of a memory one cannot quite grasp. Some saw in it a peninsula shaped like a crescent moon. Others swore they saw ruins outlined in delicate strokes, though when they looked again, the ruins had shifted or disappeared. A few believed the map was alive, revealing only what the viewer was ready to understand. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The map led to the sea. Its final line unfurled toward a single unbroken horizon, dissolving into soft, unfinished strokes, as though the cartographer himself had paused mid-gesture, or as though the destination was never meant to be drawn at all. And so the chapter ends where the map ends, at a shoreline washed with the moonlit fog, where the boundary between land and water blurs into soft silver. Imagine standing there now, the night cool against your skin, listening to the steady hum of the tide. The map rests in your hands, its parchment warm despite the chill. In the distance, the waves gather and release their breath, as if marking the passing of unseen hours. Perhaps the cartographer reached this very place. Perhaps he stepped forward, guided not by certainty, but by the quiet pull of something older than memory. Or perhaps he stood where you now stand, simply listening, waiting for the world to whisper the next line. Some destinations do not appear on any map, so some landscapes reveal themselves only in silence, and some paths, the most sacred, the most ancient, are meant to be walked with eyes half closed, on the threshold between waking and dream. Where the map fades, wonder begins, and so you remain there, suspended in gentle uncertainty, with the fog drifting around you like a soft, unfinished story. A destination waits, patient, unseen, somewhere beyond the line the cartographer could not draw. A place the world remembers, even if we do not. The library beneath the sand. A desert night so still, so impossibly gentle, that even the smallest grain of sand seems to hold its breath. The wind, usually a restless wanderer, has folded itself away. The stars, scattered like ancient runes across the sky, look down with a kind of knowing silence, as though they have seen this night before, many times, across forgotten eras when the world was younger and the dunes had other names. Beneath this sky, a single dune rises like the back of a sleeping colossus. Its curve is slow, its shadow soft, and its presence feels older than language. At its base, half-buried stones lie in a careful crescent, positioned too deliberately to be natural. They drink the moonlight in complete stillness, and one can almost imagine that they remember something vast and long concealed. It is said that beneath this dune, beneath its mantle of drifting sand and silent history, lies an ancient library. Not a library in the way we imagine them today. Not shelves, not floors, not walls heavy with parchment. No, this one is whispered to be more like a vaulted labyrinth carved into the bones of the earth. A place where scrolls were inked with the first questions humanity ever dared to whisper toward the stars. Questions not meant to be spoken aloud in the daytime, but murmured in solitude where only the wind could carry them away. Some believe the library was never meant for ordinary eyes, so certain truths, the elders say, were inked before the world learned how to listen. Tonight, as the moon rises higher, you may imagine yourself standing at the edge of this dune. Alone, untouched by hurry, listening to the desert inhale and exhale as though it were dreaming. The air is cool. The sand shifts under your feet with a softness that speaks of unfathomable layers beneath. And somewhere beneath that shifting veil, a door waits, invisible, patient. marked by the moon. Whispers tell us that long ago, caravans crossed this very place without ever knowing what slept beneath them. They moved in slow procession, bells chiming softly, torches flickering like drifting constellations, camels stepping in measured rhythm. Some nights, it is said, a traveler would pause and place a hand upon the sand, frowning as though something pulsed beneath it. Some gentle, distant echo like the heartbeat of a buried world. Most would move on. A few did not. Those few would speak of strange dreams beneath the desert moon. Dreams of spiral-shaped symbols glowing like embers, of stairways descending endlessly, of scrolls fluttering in a wind that did not come from the surface. These dreamers would wake with sand clinging to their fingertips, as if they had touched a threshold they could not see. And then there were the monks. Their story lingers like a thin murmured thread, woven through the centuries. From distant mountains they traveled, bearing staffs carved with constellations and carrying small lanterns that burned with pale, steady flames. They were seekers of the first language, a language said to unlock not power, but understanding. A clarity so profound, it could quiet even the noisiest corners of the mind. The monks believed that beneath these sands lay the last archive of that language. They followed fragments of forgotten maps, starlit coordinates, and a single sentence passed down through generations. Where memory fades, the earth remembers. They arrived at the dune under a moon like this one, bowed their heads, placed their palms upon the sand, and vanished. Some say they descended willingly. Others say the desert took them in a gesture of rare mercy, offering them a home within its dream-deep chambers. But most agree on one thing: no trace of them was ever found. Even now, the surface carries no mark of their passing. Only silence, vast and unbroken. If you listen closely to the desert night, you may almost hear what the library is said to hold. Not commandments, not prophecies, not records of kings or wars. Instead, the library beneath the sand was devoted to questions, soft questions, patient questions, the kind that rise unbidden when the world grows quiet enough. Some scrolls, according to legend, contained nothing but symbols, spirals, crescents, star-marked diagrams. Shapes meant to guide the mind inward. Others spoke of the breath between thoughts, a sacred moment where the self dissolves into stillness. A few contained alphabets no one has yet decoded. Those seekers have tried for centuries. They say one script resembled ripples in water. Another resembled dunes seen from great heights. And one rarely described looked like the way dust swirls in sunlight. To read these alphabets, the monks taught, one had to slow the mind until even the heartbeat felt like a distant echo. Only then would the meaning reveal itself, not through words, but through understanding. It is said the library's creators believed that truth did not hide. It simply required stillness. And so they buried their knowledge not to protect it from the world, but to protect it for the world. To keep it safe until people grew quiet enough, gentle enough, patient enough to approach it without demand. In forgotten corners of the earth, burial is not always an ending. Sometimes it is an act of reverence, a way of preserving what is sacred. The desert understands this. Every dune, every drift of sand is a keeper of quiet memory. It buries not to erase, but to protect, to shield fragile things from time, wind, and human haste. The library beneath the sand was designed with this in mind. Its architects trusted the desert's silence more than any wall or gate. And perhaps they understood something else. That knowledge too powerful, too tender, or too luminous for restless hands must be hidden until the right moment. Until the world leans in with true humility. The sands shift. Tides of golden dust moving like a slow breath art across the face of the earth. They blur footsteps, swallow ruins, cradle the forgotten, and in doing so, they create a kind of sacred waiting, a long and gentle pause. Perhaps the library's architects knew that humanity would one day need a place untouched by noise. A place where knowledge rests in darkness, waiting like a seed. Perhaps they believed that silence is its own form of preservation. And now, as you stand here in imagination, at the base of this ancient dune, beneath the wide desert moon, let yourself feel what lies beneath your feet. Not stone, not sand, but presence. Invisible, vast, patient. The night deepens around you, warm and weightless. A soft breeze moves through the dunes, stirring the surface as though something beneath is breathing again after a long sleep. The stars blink slowly, and their faint light paints the sand in silver tones, like pages waiting to be read. Kneel, if you wish. Let your palms rest upon the cool grains. Let the silence settle around your shoulders like a cloak. In this moment, the boundary between above and below feels thin, like parchment held against a candle flame, glowing with secrets. Perhaps you will sense the ghost of a doorway, perhaps only a hush. Some believe the library reveals itself not to the eyes, but to the quiet inside the seeker. Others say that certain doors open only when the mind becomes still enough to hear them. And maybe the library is not a single place at all, but 1,000 sleeping chambers scattered across the world, hidden wherever silence gathers and waits. No one truly knows, but as you linger in this moonlit stillness, one truth settles softly around you, like settling sand. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And perhaps, just perhaps, this library was never meant to be found by those who search with urgency, only by those who arrive with wonder. The night continues its slow drift. The dune remains unchanged, guarding its secret with patient grace. And somewhere beneath your resting hands, whether deep in stone vaults or deep in your imagination, lies a great hush filled with forgotten questions, waiting for the world to grow quiet enough to understand them. As the desert breathes, as the stars wheel gently overhead, the library sleeps on, unseen, unbroken, perfectly preserved in silence. And as your thoughts soften, drifting like grains of sand in the moonlight, you carry with you the faintest understanding. Some doors open only in the mind's slow moonlit chambers, and perhaps you have already stepped across one. The city that only woke at dusk, it begins with a sky the color of fading violets. Not the purple of living twilight, not the bold hue that announces the evening's arrival, but the pale and tender shade that forms only when the horizon hesitates, unsure whether to give the day permission to end. In that hesitation, in that small pause of breath as across the heavens, something ancient stirs. It is said that in this fragile moment, the outline of a forgotten city reveals itself, not through light, nor through shadow, but through a kind of softened presence. Like the memory of architecture projected across the fabric of dusk. Some travelers claim they saw it first as a suggestion, Pillars half-formed against the cooling sky, rooftops shaped from nothing more than the thinning edges of light, archway drawn by invisible hands upon the air. Others spoke of faint bells drifting across the desert winds long before any shape appeared at all. Notes so delicate they might have been the size of distant mountains, cooling after the heat of day. And there were stories whispered around fires in forgotten caravanseries, of footsteps heard where no path had ever been marked. Footsteps that seemed neither hurried nor wandering, but purposeful, like the slow procession of a people who walked only when the world turned its gaze away. We begin our journey here, beneath the violet sky of hesitation, guided not by landmarks, for there are none, but by the murmur of those old tales that linger in the spaces between history and dreaming. At the edge of a long emptied plain, we find the first clue of the city that wakes at dusk. A gate stands alone, unmoving, shaped from stone so worn it resembles weathered bone. Its carvings have surrendered to time, yet their spirit remains. Spirals, crescents, and soft geometric echoes of a culture that measured life in the moments between sun and star. The gate is quiet, still, but the stillness does not feel dead. Rather, it feels like the quiet of a sleeping creature, breathing slowly, hidden beneath layers of dust and memory. As we step closer, the air cools, not sharply, but gently, the way breath cools when whispered near the surface of water. It is said that this gate once marked the threshold between two worlds, the world of daylight certainty and the softer, more mutable world that blooms only when sunlight withdraws. Some believe the city existed in both realms at once. Others think it never fully belonged to either. The truth, like the gate's crumbling script, refuses to speak directly. And so we enter the forgotten colonnades beyond, not seeking answers, but simply listening for the questions they might ask of us. The ruins extend before us like rows of petrified trees, their columns cracked, bowed and embraced by vines thick as ancient ropes. These vines climb with a patient hunger, swallowing stone inch by inch, weaving themselves into the very bones of the structures they cling to. Somewhere within this living labyrinth, a faint ringing stirs. A bell, perhaps, or the echo of a bell remembered by the stones themselves. Whoopers tell us that the people who built this place believed shadow was the truest form of architecture. Light, they said, deceived. Light exaggerated edges, invented distance, pretended at clarity. But shadow revealed. Shadow softened the world into its essential shapes, returned all things to their quiet, interior truths. It was during dusk, the sacred hour of paused breath, that their temples, their libraries, their meeting halls revealed their intended forms. In daylight, the city was incomplete, but in the long exhale of sunset, its true geometry awakened. Perhaps this is why the ruins feel different, as the last edges of sunlight begin to loosen around them. Columns that looked broken now seem aligned, their imperfections transformed into purposeful patterns. Shattered lintels gaze skyward, like observatories waiting for celestial answers. Even the vines shift in character, arranging themselves into soft, deliberate arcs, as though they, too, belong to the city's forgotten design. Beneath the silence, one begins to sense an intelligence rooted not in any single era, but in the long memory of Earth itself. Historians, the few who dared to write about this elusive place, traced its foundations to one of the earliest civilizations of the desert rim, a A people whose names have melted from the pages of time, whose symbols survive only as half-remembered echoes carved into stone and scattered across dunes. They believed dusk was the hour when the world stopped breathing. Not metaphorically, not spiritually, but truly, cosmically. They taught that every living thing, every shifting grain of sand, every star resting in the cradle of the night sky, shared one collective breath. Each dawn was the world inhaling, each dusk the exhale. And in the delicate space between quiet, stillness, a moment where nothing moved because everything was waiting. The city was built to honor that pause, to stand as witness to the universe remembering itself, to freeze time long enough that dreams could step across the threshold of the waking world and leave their imprint upon it. Perhaps it is no wonder then that travelers swore they heard movement in an empty place. For if the city was shaped to echo dreams, then perhaps dreams continued to walk its streets long after its people were gone. We wander deeper. The colonnades give way to wide terraces cracked by roots and weather, their stones forming patterns that refuse to settle into logic. Circles within squares, lines that lead nowhere, channels carved into the ground as though meant to hold water or light or something more intangible. Somewhere beneath our feet, the city hums. Not audibly. No vibration touches the ear. It is more like the suggestion of a hum, a presence felt in the bones, as if the stones remember being part of something living, and ache faintly with the ghost of that purpose. Time has reshaped these streets into riddles. What once directed the flow of evening rituals now lies scattered in bewildering spirals. Walls that once held sacred inscriptions have collapsed into mosaics of dust. And yet, something of the old meaning lingers. It is said that this city did not simply endure time. It negotiated with it, exchanged pieces of itself. A column here, a courtyard that's near, to remain anchored to its chosen hour of twilight. Perhaps that is why its ruins feel neither abandoned nor fully present. Why standing among them feels like standing inside an echo, a place caught between being remembered and being forgotten. Stones carry memories long after people forget them, a belief held by many ancient cultures. But here, in this half-formed place, the truth of it becomes almost tangible. Touch a wall and you feel temperature shifts like changing seasons. Lay your hand upon a fallen column and the faint impression of a once busy world seems to flicker in the back of your mind. Not images, not stories, just sensations. A dusty breeze, a distant chant, the warmth of torches swaying in slow procession. It is said the stones here were cut from quarries marked by stars, chosen not for strength, but for resonance, for the way they could store the breath of dusk within their mineral hearts. Perhaps that is why the city feels as though it is waiting, not for people to return, but for the right alignment of light and silence to wake whatever remains inside its ancient bones. And perhaps a softer whisper suggests, it is waiting for the listener too. Our wandering brings us at last to a wide open terrace, the highest point of the ruins. Here, the wind is gentle, cool and steady, like the long breath of a world settling into sleep. The horizon deepens, shifting from violet to muted indigo. The day's final colors drain slowly away, leaving behind a sky that feels both young and impossibly old. We stand at the terrace's edge, looking out over the fractured geometry of the city. From this height, its riddles seem less chaotic. There is a pattern after all. One meant not for daylight eyes, but for the softer vision that awakens when day has finished speaking. The bells, if they ever existed, are silent now. The footsteps have retreated into whatever dream first summoned them. The vines rustle faintly, whispering nothing decipherable. And yet, it feels as though something might stir at any moment. Not with grandeur, not with sudden revelation, but with the quiet certainty of a sigh released after thousands of years. Perhaps the city will wake. Perhaps it will not. Perhaps it was never meant to be found by those who seek answers. Perhaps it reveals itself only to those who stand at the threshold with wonder instead of expectation. The terrace grows dim. Our breath matches the rhythm of the cooling air. And in this shared stillness, the final invitation of the city reaches us. Not through sound, but through a feeling. Stay here a moment longer, just long enough to listen, just long enough to let the night settle around you like the soft closing of ancient wings. For some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. And somewhere, beneath the deepening silence, the city might be waking again. Not in certainty, but in the gentle ache of wondering. The astronomer's forgotten constellation. It is said that on the highest roofs of the old world, where frost collects like quiet thoughts and the wind moves as gently as an untold story, there once sat a solitary astronomer. She kept no lantern beside her, for she believed that even the smallest flame could interrupt the delicate conversations of the stars. Wrapped in a robe the color of midnight seawater, she waited on the cold stone, listening to the hush of the sky as if it were a living thing breathing above her. Whispers tell us that on one of these nights, when the moon drifted like a pale memory and the city below had fallen into its deepest silence, she opened a manuscript older than any shadow on earth. Its pages, worn to a soft unevenness, carried the faint scent of desert winds and forgotten halls. And there, between brittle lines of fading ink, she found it. A name erased from every known sky map, a pattern of light spoken of only in the language of the vanished, a constellation that was said to guide seekers towards sanctuaries long removed from the world's waking memory. Some believe the manuscript found her rather than the other way around, that it had been waiting for the hand of someone who could still hear the unbroken thread that joins heaven to earth. Others say it was a mistake, a misreading of a smudged symbol. But the astronomer felt something stir, something like an ancient recognition, like the soft chime of a bell buried beneath centuries of sand. And so the quiet pursuit began. It is a gentle truth that the cosmos rarely reveals its secrets all at once. The astronomer knew this, yet each night, as she traced the shape of the missing constellation in the air with her finger, an ache moved quietly within her. She imagined it as a lantern once held aloft by celestial wanderers, its glow now lost, its purpose drifting untethered through the dark. In forgotten corners of the earth, myths spoke of this cluster of stars as a pathway, a procession of shimmering messengers who carried secrets meant only for those willing to listen without expectation. Some stories insisted these stars had once formed a spiral, like a seashell or the whirl of a newborn's breath, guiding travelers to places built from silence, sanctuaries each shape before memory learned to walk. To follow these stories, the astronomer traveled through landscapes steeped in ages of dust and longing. She walked beneath pale dawns and cloud-heavy dusks, always keeping the manuscript close to her heart. Its fragile weight reminded her that not everything worth seeking remains visible. Her first destination was an ancient observatory carved from polished stone, perched above a valley filled with the sighing of distant pines. Time had softened its edges, and vines crept like slow thoughts across its sloping walls. But the heart of the place still breathed with purpose. Here, generations had charted the heavens by torchlight, copying the stories written across the night. Beneath its dome, she found a mosaic of stars inlaid into the floor. Thousands of tiny fragments of clay and quartz arranged with reverence. But when she knelt to search, the pattern she carried in her memory was nowhere among them. The forgotten constellation had been removed, its absence leaving the faintest outline, as if the stones that once held its shape had faded into dust rather than been taken by human hands. She lingered there, in the hush of the observatory, listening to what was not said. And in that vast unspoken quiet, something old seemed to ripple through the air, an echo, perhaps, of the moment the stars themselves were rearranged. Some say the universe shifts in ways subtle enough to elude even the watchful. Others claim it is human intention that redraws the sky, erasing what no longer serves the stories of the living. But as the astronomer pressed her palm to the cold floor, she felt neither deception nor loss, only a strange tenderness, as if the heavens had once held a secret too precious to remain exposed. Her journey led her next to a temple hidden deep within a forest of towering ancient trees. Their leaves murmured softly, as though passing along old conversations from root to root. The temple's columns rose like petrified moonbeams, each etched with symbols of spirals, waves, and delicate star markings. It had been built to face a single point in the night sky, a point now empty. Priests, long gone, had shaped the architecture so that once a year, a beam of starlight would travel through the entrance hall and strike a polished slab of obsidian at the far end, illuminating a message only visible for a moment. But with the constellation missing, that sacred illumination no longer came. The hall remained dark, its secrets unawakened. Standing in the center, surrounded by the faint scent of moss and centuries-old incense, the astronomer lifted the manuscript again. The parchment rustled like dry leaves brushing stone, and she softly whispered the constellation's forgotten name, careful not to disturb the temple's quiet sorrow. The air responded. It did not brighten or shift, but it grew aware, as if recognizing the name, as if remembering. Perhaps, she thought, the stars had not vanished at all. Perhaps they had simply turned away, hiding their light until the world remembered how to look without demanding certainty. Beneath the silence of that hollowed chamber, she wondered what it meant for something to disappear from the heavens. Was it a cosmic wandering? A drift into new purpose? Or was it the consequence of human hands, reshaping the night to match a story more convenient? The temple seemed to breathe with her question. Her path continued into regions where myths are stronger than daylight. Shepherds spoke of nights when the sky trembled gently, as though rearranging itself. Nomads told of a star that flickered with a soft pulse, guiding them to an oasis that appeared only in dreams. Monks in mountain monasteries recited chants describing a celestial gate that once opened between worlds, allowing knowledge to pass like water between cupped hands. All these stories circled the same idea, a constellation that existed in the space between remembrance and forgetting. The astronomer gathered these fragments like fallen feathers, tucking them into the folds of her thoughts. With each tale, the missing pattern of stars drew itself more clearly within her mind. Not a rigid map, but a gesture, a breath, something fluid, drifting, as though meant to be understood with intuition rather than sight. There were nights when she climbed barren cliffs simply to sit beneath the sky's enormous stillness. She would close her eyes and imagine the stars aligning once more, forming the spiral she had read about. The one said to lead towards sanctuaries buried beneath centuries of shifting worlds. And sometimes, only sometimes, she felt that spiral shimmer against the darkness behind her eyelids, like the memory of a forgotten melody. As seasons turned, the astronomer found herself not at the end of her journey, but wrapped gently within its center. The more she searched for the constellation, the more she sensed that its disappearance was itself a message, a quiet teaching about the nature of presence and absence. Perhaps nothing is ever truly lost, she thought. Not stars, not stories, not the small hopes carried within our breath. Perhaps they simply wait behind the veil, holding their shape until we are ready to listen with the kind of stillness the universe understands. One night, years after she had first opened the fragile manuscript, she returned to the rooftop where everything began. The air held a tender chill, and the city below whispered with distant murmurs, softer than dreams. Above her, the sky spread wide, dark and infinite, like an ancient scroll unrolled across eternity. She lifted her face, letting the cool starlight touch her closed eyelids. And there, in the quiet spaces between heartbeat and breath, she felt it. A single star flickering alone, so faint it might have been mistaken for imagination. So gentle it seemed to breathe, but it was there. One point of light remembering a pattern the universe still held close to its heart. She did not reach for it. She did not try to name it. Instead, she simply listened to the sky's soft whisper, to the memory behind the silence, to the presence of something that had never truly gone, only hidden itself like a sacred truth, waiting for the moment of return. And as she sat in the stillness of that rooftop, the forgotten constellation shimmered, not in the heavens, but within her. A reminder that some wonders do not need to be seen to be real. Some truths do not need to be found to exist. Some voices only echo when we are ready to hear them. And so the chapter closes like a slow exhale, with the faint gleam of a star, alone yet infinite, carrying the shape of everything we have ever sought and everything we are just beginning to remember. The gate carved from moonlight and bone. It is said that in one of the quietest corners of the world, far from roads, far from kingdoms, far from the restless footfall of cities, there lies a valley washed eternally in pale silver light. No map marks it. No caravan speaks of it openly. Yet, among the oldest nomads, those whose memories run deeper than the dunes, whispers tell us that a gate once stood there. A gate carved not from stone, nor wood, nor metal, but from something far more ancient, far more private to the fabric of the earth. Some believe the gate was formed from the luminous remains of creatures who walked between realms, beings too soft to cast shadows and too bright to leave footprints. Others said it was simply bone left to rest under so many layers of moonlight that it became half celestial, shimmering in the stillness like frost that breathes. But most who spoke of it refused to speak too long, for in the hush between their words drifted a strange feeling. A feeling like cool breath upon the skin when no wind stirred at all. In forgotten corners of the earth, it is often the silence that speaks first. And so, the tale begins with silence. A valley of silver hush, a gate that waited. Those who approached the gate of Moonlight and Bone did so without always understanding why. Many travelers, wandering through desert passes or drifting along old pilgrimage routes, would feel something tug gently at them, as though a soft thread of light were drawing them toward a place they had almost remembered. They described the moment in similar ways. A sudden pause in the world, a thinning of the air, a breath brushing past their cheek, cool and delicate, like the sigh of someone long forgotten calling their name. The valley itself was said to shimmer like a place caught between breaths. Mist gathered low to the ground, more silver than white, drifting in slow ribbons that moved independently of the wind. Stones hummed faintly when touched, not with sound but with something that was felt rather than heard, as if the land remembered footsteps from ages older than speech. And at its heart, the gate rose, tall as 3 men, wide enough for a single traveler to stand within its embrace. Its surface was smooth, but not clean, etched with spirals so subtle they only revealed themselves when the moon reached its thinnest crescent, the night when the sky hid more light than it offered. Those spirals, delicate, endless, breathing into one another, were said to be maps of prayers or memories, or the unfocused dreams of a world still learning to wake. Some believed the spirals had been written by the nomadic priests who once wandered these lands, their robes sewn with beads of bone, their eyes lined with ash that allowed them to see the world in layers. Others whispered of rituals performed under veiled moons, rites meant to soften the boundary between breath and starlight. But no story quite matched the feeling people described when they stood before the gate. A quiet sense that the world around them was gently leaning inward, waiting. Waiting for what? None could say. Perhaps a name. Perhaps a moment. Perhaps a memory long buried beneath the dust of living. But the gate waited all the same. Whispers tell us that the nomadic priests, those wanderers who lived more in silence than in speech, believed that thresholds were living things. They were not merely spaces between here and there. They were beings of their own, soft-faced, patient, shaped from the quiet understanding that every step forward is also a step away. To cross a threshold, they taught, was to let something go, to step into a new breath, to allow oneself to become slightly less of what had been, and slightly more of what might yet be. The gate of Moonlight and Bone was the greatest threshold of all. But unlike most gates, built to divide what lies inside from what stirs outside, this one was believed to open toward neither land nor sky. Instead, the priests murmured that it opened toward a moment that resided deep within the human soul, a moment unreachable by ordinary time, a moment travelers carried unknowingly through their lives, like a closed seed, hard and silent, waiting for some unseen moonrise to coax it open. Some priests said the gate revealed the memory a person had been searching for without knowing they searched. Others said it revealed the name a person had once carried before birth, the name forgotten the moment they opened their eyes to daylight. A few, in hushed tones, suggested the gate whisper echoed the breath of one's first sorrow, or the shape of a promise made long before language learned to form edges around sound. And still, the valley remained gentle and soft. a place where mist curled at the ankles like quiet animals, unafraid of humans. Some travelers swore they heard faint murmurs as they approached. The rustle of feathers, though no bird stirred. The soft shift of many footsteps, though the valley remained empty. One man claimed he saw shadows cast, not by him, but by someone standing just behind him, who vanished the moment he turned. A woman once described the feeling of another hand brushing hers, though she traveled alone. Yet none of these tales carried fear. No trembling, no dread. The valley, for all its strangeness, remained sacred, its quiet as tender as the last fading light before night fully arrives. The gate, half luminous, half bone, seemed always aware of those who approached, not in a watching way, but in a listening one, as though it existed to absorb the unspoken parts of a person, the questions, the tiredness, the soft ache of a heart that had waited too long for something unnamed. Beneath the silence, many felt the spirals breathe, and it is said that if you placed your hand upon the gate, if you allowed your skin to touch the smooth, cool surface shimmering with pale residue, you might feel a faint pulse. Not your own. Not entirely separate. Something in between. Some described it as the heartbeat of the earth remembering you. Others believed it was the breath of a different realm brushing close. A few thought it was simply the echo of their own longing reflected back. Yet whatever one felt in that moment, it left them changed, slightly, quietly, as though the world had turned a fraction of a degree, revealing a sliver of truth that could not be spoken aloud without losing its shape. Where memory fades, transformation begins. That is what the priests taught as they wandered under veiled moons, moving like drifting embers through the desert night. They carried no scrolls, yet the stories they left behind became the foundation of countless oral traditions. Soft tales murmured beside dying campfires, stories meant not to explain the world, but to lull the listener into a deeper way of seeing. They said the gate of moonlight and bone was not meant to be opened by force, nor by prayer, nor by ritual. It simply opened when a person was ready to step into a moment they had spent a lifetime circling. Not every traveler who reached the valley witnessed this opening. For some, the gate remained silent, its spirals dim and unreadable. For others, it flickered faintly, as though considering, and for a few, those whose hearts had grown tired from carrying too many unspoken things, the spirals brightened into a soft glow. No one could describe precisely what happened then. Words failed. Memories blurred. Some said the gate seemed to dissolve into silver mist, the bone turning to light, the light turning to breath. Others said it became transparent, revealing something behind it that was not landscape, not sky, but something closer to a vast, quiet memory. One wanderer claimed he stepped through and found himself standing at the moment he first learned the meaning of loneliness. Another said she stepped into the warmth of a promise she had forgotten she made to herself as a child. A third whispered that he saw nothing at all, only felt a deep stillness wash through him, like a river smoothing a stone over centuries. Whatever they encountered, none returned wholly unchanged. Yet the world did not shift dramatically. No revelations tore through the sky, no voices thundered. Instead, the change arrived slowly, gently, like dawn light touching the edges of a forgotten room. For some, a long-carried grief became softer. For others, a question that had haunted them simply dissolved. And for a few, the knowledge that they were not as alone as they once believed settled quietly into their bones. Time passed, or perhaps it folded, as thresholds often do. The valley slipped from memory, swallowed by drifting sands and shifting winds. The nomadic priests vanished, leaving behind only fragments of their rituals carried through the centuries by those who listened closely. And now, it is said that the gate stands half buried beneath the silver dust of ages. Its spirals dimmed, but still faintly shimmering beneath the thinnest moon. Its bones softened, its edges blurred by wind and time, yet still holding that quiet breath that once drew travelers from distant horizons. Some evenings, when clouds drift low and the air holds a chill that feels oddly familiar, wanderers claim the valley glows faintly, as though moonlight were rising from the ground rather than falling from the sky. In those moments, it is believed the gate remembers those who once touched it, remembers those who approached with names forgotten even to themselves, and perhaps it remembers you. For in the quietest corners of the mind, certain doors remain half open, certain spirals continue turning, certain breaths continue brushing against us like the softest reminder of something both ancient and tender, waiting just beyond the reach of waking. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it was never meant to be understood. Perhaps it simply waits, Bayesian silver endless, for the moment when your own threshold softens and the hidden gate within you glows again beneath drifting clouds. For some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some doors open not to a place, but to a moment, quiet as moonlight, gentle as bone, waiting in the stillness of your soul. The temple that remembered its builders, it is said that in a forgotten region where the forest thickens like a dream, there rises a shape the earth no longer tries to hide. Stone pillars, tall, pale, and impossibly smooth, lift themselves from the undergrowth as though waking from a long and patient sleep. Mist clings to their fluted sides. Moss softens their shadows. And all around them, the woods hold their breath, as though aware that this is not merely a place, but a memory, wearing the disguise of ruins. Some travelers speak of the temple as if it were alive. Others insist that it listens. A few, in hushed voices, claim that it remembers. Tonight, under a dim veil of drifting cloud, the forest reveals the structure the way an old storyteller reveals the beginning of a tale. Slowly, reverently, with an air of something sacred stirring beneath the surface. The pillars stand like ancient sentinels around the entrance, their symmetry too perfect to be accidental, too beautiful to be forgotten. Between them, fallen leaves gather in spirals, as if the wind still follows the patterns once etched into sacred floors. And here, in this quiet clearing, our journey begins. In the hush of the forest, something opens. If you listen closely, beneath the sigh of branches and the settling of dusk, there is a faint vibration in the air. It is not quite a sound, not quite an echo. More like the memory of a chant that once rose to the treetops and drew down stars. Whispers tell us that the temple knew its builders, that its stones warmed when they approached, that its thresholds glowed faintly in the evenings when their footsteps returned after long days of carving, lifting, weaving the sacred designs of their devotion. Tonight, as you step closer, the air itself seems to part with gentle reluctance, as though the place senses a visitor and offers a cautious welcome. A single path winds inward, bordered by roots that twist like sleeping serpents. Lantern light. Your lantern light flickers against the pale stone of the entrance art. As the glow touches the carvings, the patterns appear to deepen, shifting like slow breath beneath the surface. And so, with quiet steps, you cross into shadow. The corridors receive you with soft, echoing darkness. Inside, the air is cool and tender, carrying a faint scent of wet stone and age-old dust. The walls rise high like cliffs on either side, their surfaces smoother than the world outside could have preserved. No vines creep here. No moss dares intrude. It is as though some invisible hand still tends the interior, keeping it as close to the builder's intentions as the centuries will allow. It is said that those who once shaped this place believed that every stone held a memory. Not metaphorically, literally. They thought the breath exhaled during the lifting of a block would sink into its pores, mingling with the minerals, becoming part of its essence forever. Where memory fades, they carved reminders. Where silence settled, they added prayers. Where shadows gathered, they placed symbols meant to glow beneath moonlight or flame. You raise your lantern toward one such carving. What you see does not remain still. In the golden flicker of the flame, the lines shift, not with motion, but with meaning. What first appears as a simple spiral widens into an open hand, then lengthens into a figure carrying a bowl of stars. But when you blink, when the light wavers, it becomes simply a pattern again. Swirling curves, chiseled with care. Some say the images were designed to change based on the angle of light. Others believe the temple only reveals certain forms to those who come with calm thoughts and an open heart. And yet, perhaps the truth is simpler. Stone, like memory, only shows what is asked of it. You continue deeper. The architecture seems to inhale as you walk. Ahead, the corridor widens into a chamber whose roof opens slightly to the sky, allowing soft evening light to drip in like water. The moon is still hidden behind clouds, but its presence haunts the edges of the opening, silvering the air. Around you, 12 pillars form a perfect circle. Each bears a vertical groove running from top to bottom, a design scholars still debate. Though the old legends offer an answer, these were the lines of breath. The builders believed that breath carried spirit, and spirit carried memory. So with every exhalation offered during ritual, the grooves would hold the intention, the gratitude, the sorrow, or the hope released into them. The temple does not hold memories by accident. It was built to collect them. You walk your fingertips along one groove. The stone is warm, impossibly so in this chilled night air. The warmth is faint, no stronger than the heat left on a cushion after someone rises from it. But it is unmistakable. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. The air shifts gently around you, as if acknowledging your touch. Beyond this chamber lies another, darker, deeper, and more solemn, aligned with forgotten suns. This next hall narrows to a long rectangular space whose ceiling descends gently, funneling focus toward a single altar at the far end. It is not an altar of sacrifice, but of alignment. The builders designed the hall so that twice a year, at the turning of solstice, a shaft of sunlight would enter through a tiny aperture above and illuminate the altar like a divine finger touching the world. Even now, long after the aperture has filled with dust and time, the design retains an air of cosmic intention. Beneath the silence, you sense the weight of cycles, the patience of stars, the slow rhythms of an ancient people who measured time not in days but in breaths shared between earth and sky. On the altar rests a bowl carved from translucent stone. It is empty, yet there is a subtle shimmer hovering above it, like a trapped exhalation waiting for release. Some believe this bowl once held the spirits of the builder's ancestors. Others believe it held water drawn from a river that no longer flows. And a few whisper that it held nothing, for the bowl itself was the prayer, carved to remember the hands that shaped it. You lean closer, sensing a faint hum, as though the stone vibrates with a long-forgotten song. Their story emerges in pieces, soft as drifting ash. As you wander deeper into the temple, the chambers grow quieter, as if each step carries you further from the outer world and closer to the heart of something intimate, something that has waited centuries to be seen again. A mural stretches across one wall, faint, fragile, nearly erased by time. Your lantern coaxes it back into existence. You see figures kneeling before a rising sun. You see hands placing stones with careful alignment. You see spirals, circles, and waves. Symbols of continuity, of breath, of return. This was not a civilization obsessed with power or conquest. They worshipped continuity. They revered remembrance. They believed that the greatest act was not to build tall walls or vast empires, but to create a place that would hold the imprint of their love for generations yet unborn. And perhaps they succeeded. For standing here now, centuries later, you feel them. Not as ghosts, not as echoes, but as warmth in the stone, intentions in the air, and subtle tenderness woven into the architecture. It is said the temple loved its builders as they loved it. Each stone placed with devotion, each carving shaped with gratitude. Perhaps places can love. Perhaps walls can remember. The place where memory sleeps. At last, you reach the innermost chamber. A small circular room with no carvings, no pillars, no symbols. Only a single wall of polished stone curving in a gentle arc. The air is warm here, warmer than anywhere else. Your lantern flame steadies, as though soothed. You approach the wall. Its surface glows faintly, though no light touches it. Reaching out, you rest your palm against the stone. It feels alive. A slow, spreading warmth moves into your hand, then your arm, then your chest. It is not startling or strange, merely comforting, like leaning into a memory you had forgotten but longed to recall. Some believe this chamber was built as a cradle for collective memory. Others think it is the temple's heart, the place where the echoes gather, where all the breaths offered over centuries and swirl together in gentle harmony. You close your eyes. In the darkness behind your eyelids, you see nothing specific. No clear faces, no names, no visions, only a sense of presence, a quiet companionship, a warmth shaped like gratitude. It is almost as though the temple whispers, "Thank you for remembering us. Thank you for listening." The warmth softens, dims, and slowly returns to stillness. When you open your eyes, the chamber is quiet again. The temple exhales. Night deepens. As you step back from the wall, your lantern flickers gently, as though signaling the end of a ceremony. A hush settles across the chamber, tender and complete. Perhaps it was never meant to be found. Perhaps it waited only for those who would enter softly, without demand, without conquest. those who would treat memory itself as sacred. In forgotten corners of the earth, some places continue to dream. Some stones continue to hold the warmth of hands long vanished. Some temples continue to remember. You turn toward the corridor, walking slowly back through the chambers, the pillars, the spirals of fallen leaves. The forest awaits you outside, quiet as a sleeping world. And as you cross the threshold into night, you feel a last faint warmth lingering on your palm, like the memory of a memory. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen. Tonight, you have heard one of them, and somewhere behind you, deep in the heart of the forest, the temple rests, content, remembering still. The voyage to the island that drifts through time. It is said that somewhere beyond the reach of common winds, past the last familiar currents that cradle the mainland's shores, there lies a stretch of water so still that even the moon must lean close to admire its reflection. On such nights, when the tide hums softly against the hull of a wandering ship, a strange sight blooms upon the horizon. Not quite land, not quite cloud, but something suspended gently between the two. Sailors long gone to dust once whispered of it in hushed voices, an island that drifted not through oceans, but through time itself. Tonight, beneath a sky brushed with faint silver, a lone ship glides across that mirrored sea. Its sails breathe quietly in the windless air, moving as though guided by some ancient agreement rather than storm or breeze. There is no rush upon this voyage, no frantic search for gold, no desperate pursuit of conquest or claim, only the soft, inward pull of curiosity, the kind that stirs in the heart like a distant bell calling wanderers toward truths they cannot yet name. At the bow, lantern light sways gently, scattering warm shards across the polished wood. The sea around is so calm, so precise in its reflection, that one can hardly tell where the world above ends and the world below begins. Somewhere between these mirrored heavens, the ship slides forward, its presence barely disturbing the sleeping water. For in forgotten corners of the earth, some places awaken only for those who approach quietly. The first whisper of the island reveals itself as a thin band of shadow on the horizon. Not dark, but softly glowing, as though made from the memory of moonlight rather than solid ground. It flickers in and out of sight, dissolving with each blink, returning only when the stars overhead shift subtly in their cosmic dance. Whispers tell us that the island cannot be charted, that no compass ever points to it willingly. Instead, the sea itself must choose to reveal it, parting the veil between moments the way a priest might draw aside a curtain in a quiet sanctuary. As the ship glides closer, the ocean grows strangely luminous. Phosphorescent ripples curl along the hull like drifting threads of starlight. The deeper waters glow with a soft green haze, as though remembering ancient forests long drowned beneath them. The air thickens with a faint scent of something sweet. Not flowers, but the breath of distant rain. The sailors who once wrote of this place described the approach with reverence, as though recounting the first steps toward a holy shrine. Some claimed they heard the distant ringing of bells beneath the waves. Others swore the sky brightened or dimmed according to their own thoughts, shimmering in response to their unspoken fears and longings. Perhaps, they mused, the island was less a destination and more an echo of something carried within. Tonight, the ship's explorers say nothing. They simply watch the horizon, letting the silence wrap around them like a cloak woven from centuries of waiting. It is said that true sacred places require not footsteps, but stillness. As the night folds deeper, the island finally comes into focus. It emerges not with grandeur, but with gentleness. A faint silhouette rising from the glowing sea. Its shores curve softly like the edge of a sleeping giant. Mist drifts around its base, gold and silver under the touch of moonlight. Trees rise in delicate spirals, their trunks swirling upward in patterns, resembling the ancient symbols found etched into forgotten temples. They look as though carved by wind, or grown according to some celestial geometry beyond mortal understanding. Some believe these spiraling patterns mirror the turning of distant galaxies. Others say they mimic the movement of time itself. Not straight, not linear, but winding, looping, breathing in cycles known only to the heavens. Beneath the silence, the ship draws closer. Ruins appear between the trees. Half-buried pillars, stone archways worn smooth by centuries. Fragments of a civilization lost before history learned to record its own beginning. Each broken relic glows faintly, as though holding a warm ember of memory within its core. The explorers do not yet step onto the shore. They stand upon the deck, watching, reverent. For over the years, ancient logbooks have warned that nothing on this island behaves as it should. It is said that shadows linger too long here, stretching themselves thin across the stone, outlasting the sunlight by several heartbeats. Leaves drift downward in agonizing slow motion, as if falling through water instead of air. Waves strike the shore without rhythm, arriving early or late, as though answering to some deeper hidden clock. And in the most curious accounts, time is described not as a river but as a pool, a basin in which moments gather and settle, some heavy, some light, some rising to the surface only to sink again. The explorers murmur in quiet awe. One recalls the description from an old parchment: time here is a tide. It retreats, returns, and sometimes pauses to breathe. Another remembers the tale of a sailor who claimed he saw his own footprints on the beach before he stepped ashore. No one is certain which stories are truth and which are dreams embroidered by loneliness and longing. But on nights like this, when the sea lies flat as ancient glass and the stars seem to tilt ever so slightly toward the earth, truth and myth become gentle neighbors. And so, the explorers simply watch as the island glimmers softly like a memory, deciding whether to be remembered. The ship drifts along the island's perimeter, its lantern light flickering over ancient carvings emerging from the thick vines. Spirals, concentric circles, star marks, symbols etched, not with haste, but with devotion. They speak of cycles, of ages that return, of paths that bend, of stories that loop endlessly like the ring of a distant planet. Some scholars believe the island was once a sanctuary for a forgotten order, a brotherhood of watchers who studied the rhythms not of seasons, but of time itself. These carvings, they say, form a map, not of places but of moments. Others argue the island is a remnant of an older world, a world where time had not yet chosen its shape and still drifted like dust in celestial beams. The explorers, drifting under torchlight shadows, feel none of the need for answers, only a vast and gentle curiosity. Their thoughts slow, their breathing deepens. Even the creaking of the ship seems to soften, as if mindful of the sacred quiet. perhaps this is what the island offers. Not knowledge, not revelation, but the rare permission to feel the passing of each moment, one by one. With reverence, hours slip by, or perhaps only minutes. The island glides beside them, or perhaps the ship is the one drifting, and the island merely stands still in its own hidden century. The horizon begins to pale, touched by the faintest breath of dawn. The stars retreat slowly, as though dragging their light reluctantly from the sea's mirrored surface. And with the coming of morning, the island begins to dissolve. Its spiraling trees fade first, blurring into strokes of gold as the mist thickens. The ruins soften at the edges, like old ink left out under the rain. The carved symbols on the stone pillars flicker once, twice, then vanish entirely, enveloped by the returning veil. Some believe the island slips sideways into another moment, another century. Others say it sinks beneath the ocean, rising again only when the stars grant permission. A few whisper that it does not move at all, that it remains fixed in place while the rest of the world drifts around it like a restless child. But none of these thoughts feel urgent. The explorers stand at the ship's bow, gazing into the softening mist. The sea no longer mirrors the heavens. The first ripples appear, gentle as a breath. The world resumes its steady turning. Perhaps the island was never meant to be found in certainty. Perhaps it exists only for those who understand that time is not a strict master, but a wandering tide, retreating, returning, reshaping the shores of memory in silent cycles. As dawn spreads its golden wings across the horizon, the island fades into nothing more than a suggestion of distant land, a dream dissolving into light. Only one whisper remains, drifting through the quiet air. Time is not a line, it is a tide. And as the ship continues onward, leaving the glowing sea behind, the explorers carry with them not proof, not answers, but a gentle reverence for the moments that stand still, waiting to be felt. Before they drift away once more into the vast, patient silence. The script, written in ash and breath, it is said that every flame carries a memory, and every ember carries a truth too soft to be spoken aloud. And so, on a night when the wind moved like a tired pilgrim across the old stone courtyard, a solitary monk sat beside a dying fire. His robes hung loose around him, colored the grey of mountain dusk, and his breath drifted in small, quiet clouds. Before him, the embers glowed with the final warmth of a long-forgotten sun. With slow, deliberate motion, he reached into the ash and drew a single line, then another, and another still. The symbols he traced were of a script few living souls recognized, a language whispered to exist before kingdoms had borders, before temples had names, before the world learned to measure its stories in years instead of in heartbeats. The script was not meant to record events. It was said, instead, to capture the emotions of those who lived them. Joy that once trembled like a bird's wing, sorrow that descended like winter, hope that stepped gently as a child waking in the dark. Some believe this language was born from breath itself, shaped from the warmth that leaves the body when one speaks truths too fragile for the ear. Others claimed it drifted down from the stars, carried in the shimmering dust of comets, a gift for those who still remembered how to listen. Tonight, the monk listened. He listened to the crackle of the fire as it shrank into itself. He listened to the whisper of ash falling like pale snow. He listened to the silence between his heartbeats, where meaning often hides. Each motion of his finger was slow, reverent, an act performed not for the eyes, but for the vastness within. At last, he sat back, and the fire dimmed further, settling into a soft, ember-grey glow. Around him, the night deepened, and through that deepening, we are invited to travel, not across continents, but across the hidden chambers of memory. For there are tales, half vanished and half remembered, of wandering mystics who once carried this script wherever their bare feet touched the earth. They wrote not on parchment, but on sand, on fogged windows, on the still surfaces of lakes at dawn. They wrote to map the shifting terrain of the spirit. Those inner mountains no one sees, those rivers that bend around unspoken fears, those deserts where longing drifts like blown dust. These mystics were known as the keepers of breath. It is said they walked with neither companions nor possessions, only a small bowl of ash tied at their waists. From this ash, they drew meaning, shaping symbols with fingers, with feathered branches, with the delicate ends of dried reeds. They believed every soul was a landscape, and that only by reading the emotions written in its dust could one understand the path toward peace. Villagers who met them spoke of quiet eyes, eyes that seemed to reflect not the world outside, but the world within. Some claimed that when a keeper wrote your sorrow into the ash, you could feel that sorrow loosen, like a knot gently untied. Others whispered that these mystics carried memories that were not their own. Memories gathered from ancient ruins, from forgotten tombs, from ruins swallowed by jungle or sea. Memories preserved not in stone, but in breath, in the soft exhale of someone praying for the first time in years. Yet not all looked upon this script with wonder. Empires rose, and as empires often do, they feared what could not be controlled. Rulers studied the mystics with narrowed eyes. Advisors murmured that a language capable of revealing inner truth was a danger too great. For what emperor desires a written record of his doubts? What general wishes his fear to be carved into dust? What court, cloaked in ceremony and pride, could endure a language that laid bare intentions like bones in the sunlight? And so, in some forgotten century, whose dates even scholars debate, the keepers were driven into the wilderness. Their scrolls were taken, their bowls of ash scattered. Some wandered into deserts where no footprints lasted longer than a single night. Some journeyed to mist-laden mountains and disappeared into quiet monasteries. And some, perhaps the wisest, let their knowledge drift into silence, continuing their work only in dreams. But the script never vanished. Sacred things rarely do. Vespers tell us that certain texts, written in ash and breath, do not burn to vanish. They burn to transform. When a fire takes them, they rise. They rise into the air with the smoke, with the scent of cedar and myrrh, with the faint sigh of something being released. They rise to become part of the wind, carried like forgotten prayers that brush against the faces of those still searching. Beneath the silence of ancient forests, travelers sometimes speak of feeling watched, not by eyes, but by meaning itself. Beneath the cliffs of old monasteries, monks report finding symbols traced by no human hand upon the morning frost. And in cities whose names have eroded from their stones, the breeze occasionally gathers dust into shapes that vanish a moment later. Perhaps this script never truly required ink. Perhaps it always preferred the elements: earth, air, fire, breath. Because truth itself cannot be contained. It must move, drift, settle, rise again. And so we return to the monk by the dying fire. The night has grown heavier around him, as though the sky has drawn its dark cloak over the world. The flame beside him is now only a faint, trembling glow. Ash drifts in soft spirals, rising, falling, settling on the worn stones of the courtyard. He studies the symbols he has drawn, though he does not need to see them to understand them. Each one holds the warmth of his intention. He lifts a hand and gently, almost lovingly, touches the first symbol. It breaks under his fingertip and dissolves into dust. The second follows, then the third. Soon the courtyard becomes a small universe of drifting ash, each particle turning slowly in the air like a grey star wandering through space. In the faint light, the ash swirls, forming shapes that last for only the length of a sigh. A curved line, a spiral, a half moon, then nothing. Only the breath of the world remains. It is said, the monk does not fear forgetting these symbols, for he believes truth lives in the body long after it leaves the page. And perhaps he knows, as the keepers once knew, that the softest stories are the ones we carry without realizing. The ones written not on scrolls, but within the quiet corners of the soul. A breeze drifts across the courtyard and the symbols scatter, becoming part of the air. Some rise into the branches of the old trees. Some fall onto the stones, where they rest for a timeless moment, before the night folds over them like a blanket. A few settle on the monk's open palms. He watches them. They rest like pale feathers against his skin, and in that stillness, he imagines the words forming. Words not spoken, not carved, not captured, but felt. Words that echo without sound. Words that do not demand to be heard, only to be sensed, like the final warmth of a fading sun. Perhaps it was never meant for this script to be understood in any ordinary way. Perhaps it was meant to be inhaled, like incense in a holy room, so that those who walk through the world carry its meanings with them without knowing why they feel changed. The monk closes his eyes, ash settles. Night deepens, and somewhere in the silence a story breathes, not to be told, but to be lived. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and some languages, born of ash and breath, speak most clearly when the world grows quiet enough for their truth to rise. Tonight, as the final embers sigh their last sigh, the old script returns to the air, carried like a prayer, carried like a memory, carried like the gentle invitation to rest. And as sleep approaches, soft as drifting dust, you may feel a single grain of ash settle upon your palm. A reminder that some stories do not end. They simply fade into silence. The Pilgrims of the Hidden River. It begins, as many forgotten stories do, with a doorway carved not in stone, but in silence. In the dim hours before dawn, when the world stands between breath and waking, there is said to be a gate of crooked cedar rising from the floor of an uncharted forest. Moss hangs from its arch like a curtain of green veils, and beneath it lies a narrow path, barely more than a whisper in the earth, leading deeper into a realm where maps grow uncertain. Some travelers speak of seeing a faint shimmer beyond the wooden frame, as though the space within it trembles with an unseen wind. Others claim the arch was never built by human hands, but grew from the forest itself, coaxed upward by ancient roots that remembered how to shape passageways for wandering souls. No markers guide the way. No symbols offer warnings. And yet, in forgotten corners of the earth, the eldest stories begin here. At this gate that opens only to those who step forward without asking where the path ends. For beyond the cedar arch lies the domain of the hidden river, a waterway so veiled by drifting fog and thickets of emerald darkness that ancient cartographers left it untouched on their scrolls. Instead of lines, they left space, a pale expanse of blank parchment, as if even ink dared not trespass upon the unknown. It is here our chapter begins, beneath the hush of trees so tall their crowns blur into clouds, where the world feels both untouched and impossibly old, and the air itself seems to murmur, "Enter softly, for what you seek is not distance but depth." It is said that long before kingdoms traced borders across the land, pilgrims wandered toward this sacred river. They came not for wealth or harvest, nor for any promise of earthly reward, but for the visions whispered to flow alongside its waters. Glimpses of forgotten ages, murmurs from lives lived before memory took its current form. Whispers tell us that the river existed before the land around it took shape, before roots clung to soil, before mountains pressed their weight upon the earth. Some believe it was the final trace of an ocean that once wrapped the world in shimmering blue, a remnant of creation kept hidden so the restless might still find wonder. Others say the river does not flow at all, that it breathes, rising and falling in perfect silence, as though keeping time with the dreams of those who dare approach. Pilgrims, moving with soft steps and heads bowed, followed its rumored course through forests that swallowed light and time. They carried little, a woven bag, a shard of obsidian to reflect their own faces, and sometimes a strip of linen folded with care, on which they hoped to catch the river's mist, said to be heavy with wisdom. But the river never revealed itself easily. The forest played tricks on the senses. Pathways looped into spirals, distances stretched or collapsed without warning, and the air grew thick with the scent of wet leaves and something older, like dust from a forgotten era rising to greet the present. Beneath the silence, old voices say, the river waits for those who do not rush. And so, the pilgrims slowed, and slowing, they listened. They listened at droplets falling from broad ferns to the distant chill of birds unseen behind curtains of vapor, to the murmur of their own breath becoming indistinguishable from the breath of the forest. Somewhere ahead, water whispered, never loudly, never clearly, as if testing whether the seeker's heart could discern truth from longing. When at last the pilgrims found the river, it was rarely where they expected. It might appear as a thin thread glimmering between roots, or as a smooth sheet of water lying still beneath a cavern of overhanging branches. Sometimes it emerged from below the earth, seeping upward between stones covered in luminous moss, like memory returning after centuries of slumber. Those who gazed upon it for the first time spoke not of water, but of time. For the river seemed less like a physical thing and more like an echo carried across eras. The reflections upon its surface did not always match the world beside it. Trees appeared younger, the sky older. Shadows moved in ways that belonged to neither present nor past. It carries memories, murmured a saffron-robed wanderer in an account etched onto bark, though I cannot say whose. Indeed, myths claim that the river held the stories of epochs without names, ages before language gathered itself into words, when the world was shaped by tidal rhythms and celestial breathing. The visions granted were gentle, never commanded. Some pilgrims saw flickers of long-lost civilizations, crumbled monoliths rising anew, star-marked towers glimmering beneath moons that no longer exist. Others felt only a subtle shift within, as though a veil had been lifted from a truth they had always known but never understood. Where memory fades, the river spoke, sometimes through images, sometimes through sensation, sometimes through the simple act of being near. One pilgrim wrote, "As I walked beside its banks, the weight of my name felt lighter. I became not myself, but everyone I had ever been." Such was the quiet power of the hidden river, but its course, like its visions, was elusive. Pilgrims often attempted to follow it upstream, hoping to glimpse the legendary source, a place the old songs described as a pool of starlight buried deep within the forest's heart. Yet the river wound in patterns that defied reason. It forked into two where one had been in, vanished beneath the earth only to reappear downstream, and at times dissolved entirely into mist, leaving wanderers holding nothing but air. Some believed the river protected itself, retreating whenever footsteps came too close to origins meant to remain uncharted. Others believed the river was not moving at all, that the seekers themselves drifted through layers of time and perception, while the river remained rooted in a dimension untouched by ordinary sight. Perhaps, one ancient scroll suggests, the river is not found by direction, but by intention. Those who sought answers rarely found them. Those who sought presence often did. And so the pilgrims walked, slowly, reverently, accepting that the journey was never meant to end with arrival. The hidden river was a companion, not a destination, guiding them inward rather than forward. As days blurred into nights, and nights into a timeless hush, the pilgrims learned to see not with their eyes, but with the quiet places within their hearts. The forest, once impenetrable, softened. The fog lifted in subtle intervals, revealing glimpses of stone altars overtaken by roots, of broken pillars leaning like tired guardians, of spiral carvings etched into bark that pulsed like sleeping constellations. All of it ancient, all of it forgotten, all of it gently watching it, and always, just beyond reach, the river murmuring its patient, eternal song. There comes a moment, near the end of every pilgrimage, when the river changes. Not outwardly. Its flow remains soft, its mist cool against the skin, but in the way it touches the traveler's awareness. What once felt distant becomes intimate. What once felt mysterious becomes familiar, like a voice remembered from childhood calling through layers of time. Many describe this moment as standing on the edge of a dream that is just beginning to forget itself. The forest grows quieter. Light fades into a gentle silver. Fog gathers like a blessing rather than a barrier. And then, without warning, the river begins to dissolve. Not completely. Just enough for its shape to blur, its edges to soften, its reflections to fade into a milky haze. The water becomes indistinguishable from the mist above it. The forest shapes melt into one another until nothing remains but a soft glow, as though the world itself is exhaling its last waking breath. The pilgrims, standing at the river's side, feel no fear, only a longing, light and warm, like a memory one tries gently to hold but cannot. It is said that the river does this to teach the final lesson, that the journey was never toward a source in the world, but toward a source within. For when the river vanishes into the mist, something else emerges, a stillness so complete it feels sacred, a silence that echoes, a presence that lingers long after form is gone. Some believe the river withdraws into another realm. Some believe it continues flowing, invisible, beside those who sought it. And some believe the river was never made of water at all, but of awareness. Perhaps, old voices whisper, it was never meant to be found. When the mist clears, the pilgrims find themselves alone with the forest once more. The cedar arch that guided their first steps may appear again or may not. Its presence is unpredictable, like memory itself. What remains always is the gentle ache of a journey that has shifted something deep inside. A longing not for a place, but for a feeling. The quiet companionship of water, trees, and time. And as night settles softly around the wanderer, and sleep draws near with the hush of centuries, a final truth lingers in the air. Some voices only echo when we are ready to listen, and the hidden river, though unseen, continues its eternal flow. Not outward, but inward, guiding dreamers toward the depths they carry within. The mask that woke when touched by starlight. It is said that somewhere in the borderlands between desert and ocean, where the wind carries the scent of salt and drifting sand in equal measure, there stands a shrine that no map dares to name. Some believe it once marked the edge of a kingdom, now folded into the silence of centuries. Others claim it was never meant for any kingdom at all, but instead for wanderers, dream seekers, and those who move like shadows through the dusk. Tonight, as the moon lifts its pale face over the sleeping earth, a faint glow clings to the horizon. Beneath it, half buried in time and dust, a solitary wooden door still hangs from one hinge, gently rocking in the breath of the night. And beyond that door, resting upon a crumbled altar of veined stone, lies a mask whispered about only in the oldest songs. Some call it the mask that woke when touched by starlight. And so we begin here in this forgotten chamber of shadows and drifting sand, where the air itself feels as if it listens. A beam of moonlight slips through a broken window lattice, painting a soft silver path across the floor. The particles of dust in the air shimmer like tiny galaxies suspended in their long drift downward. When the wind moves, they swirl gently, as though stirred by some unseen hand. There, at the center of the shrine, lies the mask, carved from dark wood, the color of midnight bark. Its surface is scattered with flecks of mineral dust that catch and cradle the faint light. At first glance, the mask seems still, but as the moon's glow strengthens and the first timid stars emerge overhead, a subtle ripple travels across it, like light across water, or breath moving through a sleeping chest. It is said that the mask never stirs by the touch of human hands, nor by the passing of the sun. Only the starlight awakens it. Only the night recognizes what it is. Some whisper that this mask remembers things no living being has words for. Others say it does not remember. It dreams. And in this trembling stillness, as the moon glides through a patch of cloud and a lone star blinks directly above the open roof, you can almost imagine the mask turning its unseen gaze toward you, as though greeting an old friend returned at last. Long before this shrine decayed into ruin, long before the wind learned to weave through its empty corridors, The land was home to a people who walked softly and spoke to the night, as though it were a companion. Their name has slipped from memory. Their stories linger only as fragments. Yet in forgotten corners of the earth, one can still find their motifs. Spiral carvings, crescent shapes, delicate star lines etched along the rims of the clay vessels. These symbols echo faintly here, on the mask's shifting surface. Whispers tell us that these people believed dreams were not private musings of the mind, but shared rivers, currents flowing between generations. They believed each dream carried the footstep of an ancestor, a gentle brushing of the past against the present. To them, masks were sacred vessels, not disguises, not ornaments, but doorways. Through them, the living might walk for a moment in the echo of someone long gone and return with pieces of their insight, fragments of their wonder, or warnings carried across time. And of all their masks, this one, crafted with stardust and night-dark wood, was said to be the rarest, the most treasured, perhaps even the most feared. Its makers believed the stars themselves breathed through it. In the old stories, gatherings were held only when the sky was clear and the moon rested thin and quiet. On those nights, villagers would climb the ridge overlooking the sea, carrying small clay bowls filled with slow-burning resin. The smoke would rise in silver spirals, mingling with the wind. And at the highest point of the ridge, elders would bring forth the masks. They would place them on stone plinths and wait for the first stars to appear. Some say the starlight gathered there like dew settling on leaves. Others recall faint murmurs, voices not of this world, drifting through the air as if returning to greet familiar listeners. One legend speaks of a mask that trembled when an ancestor had something urgent to say. Another describes a mask that glowed faintly whenever the sea tides were about to shift with unusual force, as though tuned to the breath of the deep. But only one mask was believed capable of awakening. This one. The mask that lies before us now. When touched by starlight, it was said to stir, to shimmer, to shift between the face it displayed and the hidden faces within it. Some elders insisted that if one placed a hand nearby, not touching, merely near, they could feel a warmth emanating from the mask, a pulse like a soft heartbeat. Yet no one dared wear it. Perhaps it was never meant to be worn by mortal skin. Perhaps it was meant only to be witnessed. Or perhaps the one it belonged to has simply not yet returned. Here, in the quiet of the shrine, beneath beams of fractured moonlight, the mask reveals its nature ever so slowly. At certain angles, the carved eyes appear hollow. At others, they reflect a faint glimmer of starlight, as though filled with distant constellations. The mineral flecks on its surface catch the glow and release it again in gentle pulses, like breathing. Some believe the mask holds a kind of dreaming that predates humanity, a memory that belongs to the earth itself, an echo of primordial nights when stars hung low and glacier winds shaped the world. Others say it stores the dreams of those who once touched it, imprints of their fears, their longings, their half-spoken prayers, a collage of years and tears woven into its dark grain. And beneath the silence, you may sense something else, the faint suggestion that identity itself is not fixed, but fluid, a constellation of borrowed memories drifting between lives. To the ancient people, to wear a mask in ritual was not to hide oneself. It was to become permeable, to allow the past to pass through you. to let the wisdom of another life guide your footsteps for a while. The starlit mask was their highest expression of this belief. A bridge not between worlds, but between moments. A reminder that we are all, in some way, stitched together from echoes. Now the night deepens. The wind slows. The shrine settles into a stillness so complete that even the dust seems reluctant to fall. The mask remains on the altar, bathed in the softened glow of a sky now heavy with drifting clouds. It no longer ripples, no longer shifts. It simply rests. Perhaps the stars have retreated. Perhaps the dreaming has passed for now. Or perhaps the mask is listening. The way old things listen. Quietly, patiently, without demand. Some voices only echo when we are ready to hear them. And as the clouds slide over the moon, dimming the light, the altar fades into shadow. The mask becomes little more than the suggestion of a shape, a forgotten contour, a presence waiting in the dark. It is said that the mask never reveals the same face twice. Some nights it resembles a calm ancestor gazing across the ages. Other nights it appears fierce, marked with the tension of forgotten battles or lost journeys. Now, in this moment, it is unreadable, a face meant only for the night to behold. And perhaps that is enough. Not all truths demand to be uncovered. Not all memories are ours to receive. Some faces are meant to be glimpsed only in the gentlest darkness, where understanding drifts like mist just beyond reach. As your breathing softens and the last traces of the shrine fade, you may carry with you the quiet knowing that somewhere far beyond the borders of this waking world, a mask lies beneath a sky of endless stars, waiting for the next moment when starlight touches its surface and invites it, once more, to dream. And the night continues its slow, ancient vigil. The orchard that bloomed only in dreams, it is said that in a quiet valley, where the hills fold into one another like the gentle corners of an ancient book, there once lay a field that breathed differently from the world around it. Not with the wind, not with the tide of the seasons, but with something older, something softer, something that seemed to pulse from the distant edge of memory. At dusk, the field looked no different from any other. A carpet of humble grasses, pale and warm, beneath the sun's parting gaze. But those who stood there long enough, those patient enough to let silence gather like dew, would feel something stir beneath the surface. A hush, as though the earth itself were waiting. Beyond that field, legends speak of an orchard no traveller ever recorded in ink or map. No merchant spoke of it, no farmer could point to it in daylight. Yet every villager in the valley knew the orchard. They knew its scent, sweet as moonlit water. They knew the texture of its blossoms, softer than breath. And they knew, without question, that the orchard bloomed only in dreams. Under torchlight, the elders would trace its shape in the dust, their fingers trembling as though touching something sacred. Spiraled branches, star-marked fruit, petals that glowed with a pale oceanic shimmer. And the listeners, young and old, would feel a faint chill, as if the orchard were watching from just beyond the veil, a place unseen by the waking eye, yet remembered by every sleeping soul. Whispers tell us that long ago, the villagers believed dreams were not merely visions of the mind, but gentle messages from the unseen world. Guidance carried on the breath of ancestors, drifting through the night like soft incense. The orchard, they said, was where those messages gathered. a bridge between the earth beneath their feet and the realm where unspoken desires wandered freely. Each night, when sleep crept through the valley, the villagers would find themselves walking familiar paths, smooth soil underfoot, cool air brushing their cheeks, the faint glow of starlit fruit in the distance. Even those who had never met in waking life recognized one another in these shared wanderings. For in the orchard, all dreams flowed together like tributaries meeting a vast luminous sea. Some spoke of blossoms that drifted downward without ever touching the ground, dissolving into silver mist before they could be caught. Others remembered branches that bent low, as though listening to the secrets whispered beneath them. There were tales of petals glowing brighter when someone approached carrying sorrow, as if the orchard itself offered comfort. Beneath the silence of their dreaming steps, the earth hummed. Not loud, not urgent, just enough for the soul to know it was being welcomed. It is said that the blossoms were never the same from one night to the next. At times they fell like snow, slow, drifting, weightless. At others, they rose upward, swirling in delicate spirals until they vanished among the stars. Even the shadows were not quite shadows. They curled into unfamiliar shapes, soft-edged and contemplative, as though remembering a story the waking world had forgotten. Those who woke at dawn carried fragments of the orchard with them. The scent of a fruit that didn't exist. The memory of dew that shimmered like broken moonlight. The echo of a path that faded the moment they tried to describe it. And yet, despite the orchard's ephemeral nature, artists painted it with astonishing precision, brushstrokes capturing the gentle bend of its branches, the layered folds of its petals, the way light pooled beneath its canopy like calm, shallow water. Poets, too, found themselves writing verses before breakfast, lines they did not recall crafting, verses filled with imagery that matched the painter's visions exactly. The villagers believed this shared clarity was not coincidence but communion. They spoke of it in reverent tones. For if many minds dreamed the same dream, night after night, how could it be anything but a message? Beneath the quiet sky, the orchard seemed to whisper, "Come closer. There is something here for you." And still, no one ever found it by day. Travelers from distant lands, drawn by rumor, searched the hills for weeks. They walked the valley until their sandals wore thin. But the field remained just a field, blank, undisturbed, unchanged. Some travelers scoffed, some shrugged. But a few, the ones whose hearts had not yet hardened, felt the strange pull of possibility. They stood in the valley at dusk and wondered if the orchard was not meant to be seen by eyes that blinked, but by hearts that opened. One wanderer wrote in his journal, "I feel it watching me, not with eyes, but with patience, as though the orchard blooms only when the world goes quiet enough to listen." Perhaps he understood more than most. For in forgotten corners of the earth, truth often hides in softness, and rarely in the blinding certainty of daylight. There were nights, villagers said, when the orchard glowed brighter than the moon above it, each blossom shimmering like a tiny lantern, guiding dreams toward hidden wisdom. On those nights they woke with tears drying on their cheeks, not from sorrow, but from the aching beauty of something they couldn't name. Other mornings brought a gentle yearning, a longing not for a place, but for a feeling, a sense of being understood by something ancient and tender, something that asked nothing in return. Some elders believed the orchard was not a physical place at all, but a reflection of the villagers' deepest desires. A collective garden of hope, nurtured in silence, Others insisted it was real, a sacred grove that stepped only briefly into the world of dreams, because waking life was too harsh, too sharp for such delicate wonder. Perhaps both were true, perhaps neither. In matters of the unseen, certainty often fades like mist at dawn. Over time, the valley changed. The villagers grew older. New generations were born who listened to the orchard tales as bedtime stories, unsure whether to believe them. A few shrugged them off as myth, but others, those who stayed awake a little longer at night, waiting for dreams to gather, felt the orchard calling even if they had never walked among its branches. For beauty, whispered the elders, does not need evidence to exist. It only needs a place to rest. And so the legend endured, carried in quiet voices, in gently turning pages, in the hush of twilight when the air grows cooler and the mind begins to drift. Even now, some say that if you lie down in the valley field at the edge of dusk, just as the world begins to soften around you, you might feel the faint brush of a petal against your cheek. You might catch the aroma of blossoms that bloom only when the mind steps beyond its own boundaries. You may not see the orchard, not with waking eyes, but you may feel its quiet presence, lingering like an echo beneath your thoughts. And if you dream that night, you may find yourself walking along a familiar path. You may see branches bending toward you. You may witness petals falling like snow, dissolving into the soft glow of sleep. And when morning comes, when the first rays of dawn sift gently through your window, you might awaken with a single fragment of that world clinging to the edge of your pillow. A petal, faint, weightless, impossible. A reminder that some wonders choose to exist only where silence listens. Some voices only echo when we are ready to hear them. And some orchards, perhaps the most sacred ones, bloom only in dreams.